This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so the first question that we have this week says, I have a question regarding the income shown for the Blue Heron and Fairway Cafe in the GM report. For 13 days in May, Blue Heron income was $30,035, and the Fairway Cafe for 11 days was $8,984. How many meals served does this equate to? So, all right, great question. We can't give you an exact answer because sometimes tickets we can tell you what the average ticket is, but we can't tell you exactly how many meals were served with each ticket. The software just doesn't count things that way, but we can give you a very close approximation. So what that works out to on a monthly basis, if you extend that out, it works out to somewhere between around 3,500 to 3,700 meals per month at the Blue Heron. So that's about 43,000 a year at the current rate. And at the cafe, we're somewhere around 1,300 to 1,400 meals per month, which represents about 16,000 meals per year. So if you take that all together, you end up with about 60,000 meals per year at our current rate, at what we're doing with the takeout portion. And it's a little bit interesting to compare that to what it was before and to other associations that are like ours. So if you calculate it by the number of parcels that we have, and you divide that 60,000 meals per year, the current rate, by 2,250 parcels, you end up with that being about 26 meals per year per parcel, which works out to just about 2.21 meals per month per parcel. The actual number is a little bit higher because we only have about 1,850, 1,900 parcels that actually have homes on them. But just to keep the math straight from a comparison we did at a town hall in March, we end up with 2.2 meals per month. So just while we're on the topic, just because it's kind of interesting, we did a comparison of food and beverage services here at YLOA compared to Bear Valley Springs and Pine Mountain Lake at a town hall in March, I think it was March 1st. So we have 2,258 lots. They have Bear Valley Springs has 3,582 lots. Pine Mountain Lake has 3,350 lots. If you look at our total food and beverage revenue, we did $1.5 million. It looks like we got a little bit of feedback, so let me mute some of these other calls here. Okay. So for 2019 to 2020, we did about 1.55 million in total food and beverage revenue. And that was about 1.85 million in total food and beverage cost. So our operating cost was a little over $300,000, which gave us a negative margin of 20%. Gave us $686 of revenue per lot, an annual cost per lot of $135, and annual meals. Our ticket amounts are a little lower with the takeout, but at $20 per person for an average meal ticket cost before, that was 77,000 meals that we used to do. So we're doing about 20% less than what we were doing before. But that was about 2.85 meals per lot per month is what we were averaging based on those numbers. If you look at Bear Valley Springs, they do a little bit, about $400,000 more in revenue per year at their restaurants, but they also have 3,582 lots. But their food and beverage expense is $2.8 million. And their operating cost for their food and beverage services is $891,000 is their cost compared to the $300,000 that is our cost, which means they operate at a negative 46% margin on their food and beverage services. They generate less revenue per lot than we do, and the annual cost per lot at Bear Valley Springs is $249 a year. They do a total of about 97,000 meals per year, or about 8,100 meals per month, which is about 2.26 meals per lot. Pine Mountain Lake, with 3,360 lots, does only $950,000 in food and beverage revenue. They have food and beverage expense of $1.7 million, which means that their operating cost is $753,000 a year, which is a negative 79% operating margin. They only do about $283 in revenue per lot, which means that their cost per lot runs about $224. And they only serve an average of 0.85 meals per lot. And so why am I going through this? What is this? Why does this matter? Well, one, it shows that that our amenities for restaurants are operating much more cost effectively than the others. The second thing it shows is that we use our restaurants more per resident than those associations do. And if you calculate it out, we use our restaurants about 26% more frequently than Bear Valley Springs does, at least our residents do. And compared to Pine Mountain Lake, our residents use our restaurants 236% more often than they do at Pine Mountain Lake. So it just is it's hard to get a point of comparison, with our restaurants, in terms of, how are we doing financially? Is it reasonable for us to operate at these costs? We've talked before kind of ad nauseum about how you wouldn't open a restaurant here to, if you were going to go into business and you wanted to make a profit, just the installed base, the population density doesn't support it. But when you look at other associations that are like ours, you can find that we are actually much more efficient in operating costs. Our total costs for operations are less, and our amenities, our restaurants, are used more frequently by owners than they are at the other associations too. So that just helps give us a frame of reference, and kind of really points to the fact that we operate our restaurants very cost effectively with what we have to work with, and that we use them, and that they're used by a much larger portion of the population, or they're used more frequently by a smaller number of the population. I can't tell you exactly how that breaks out, but I can tell you that we're more efficient, and they're used more frequently. That jumps clearly out when you look at the operational numbers. So maybe a little bit more detail than the person asking that question was looking for. But we do that kind of financial analysis when we're looking at our operations. First of all, how are we doing? And secondly, how can we do better? Okay, next question is related to the pool. Says, hi, Jonathan, when will the pool open? Great question. We did have a member, I know we covered this a little bit before. Everybody's anxious to get the pool open, I know. Legally, we can only open the pool when we reach phase 3 of reopening. So there is still some confusion about this. There still is, are different rules being followed in different places, in different counties. And here's our bottom line, though. Because it is a direct violation of the latest information from the governor's office, if we open the pool and there is an accident, it is almost certain that our insurance will not cover it, whether it's related to COVID or related to anything else. And unfortunately, that represents a very real and significant risk to the association. Based on all the information I have, it would not be unsafe to open the pool from a COVID-19 perspective, provided we did social distancing and we limited the numbers of people using the pool, like we had done with the spa before. Before we discovered that the governor was defining homeowner association pools as public instead of. So I do think it is safe, to open the pool from a COVID-19 perspective, providing we, practice prudence and good sense and social distancing and all of those things. However, at this time, it is a direct violation of what the governor's office says. We did have a homeowner that contacted the County of Madera Health Department directly and copied me on the email. There was some exchange going back and forth. It also was a little confusing, as it seemed to imply that that the County of Madera, was open to doing it on a lap swim type basis. However, the direct quote that we have from that email exchange is that, at this time, it's not, it wouldn't be in compliance with the County of Madera rules or with the state laws at this time. They also indicated, though, that they expect the governor to potentially introduce some new rulings on this. We'll hope that will be the case, and at which point we can then make a plan to open the pool. So I know that's a lot of words. I know it's a lot of confusion. It's very confusing. I know it's very frustrating. It certainly is for me as well. This is one of those ones where it doesn't seem to make sense, but that's where the law is right now. And, I can't in good faith, open the pool if we don't have insurance coverage. It really puts the association at way too much risk, in my opinion. But we'll continue to watch that, evaluate it, and we'll provide updates to the community as we get more information, which will hopefully be soon. All right, next question. Okay, why aren't the pumps working in the lake? It looks terrible. Last year it was great. Okay, so we have 2 aerators that are installed in the lakes. One of them is operating. One of them we've had some intermittent problems with, over the last several months. It currently is out for repair. Those aerators, what they do is they help introduce oxygen into the lake. They're not directly related to to the algae that grows. What happens is when the water gets to a certain temperature, which is a fairly narrow range, we'll get an algae bloom. We are able to spray for that algae bloom, which we do. With the weather this year, though, what's happened is we actually had a bloom, and then the weather cooled off, and the bloom died back, and the lake cleared up by itself. And then we had another heat wave where algae bloomed again, and now that it's cooled off, it's actually dying back, again by itself. And then, when it heats up again, it's, probably going to bloom again, which we will watch and which we will spray. But often, what happens until temperature reaches a high enough level that the algae doesn't grow, then it clears up and, and stays clear throughout the summer. So like I said, it's not directly related to the aerators, operating. It's really more related to the temperature of the water. But we, are able to spray it and keep it clean. It does take a couple weeks, here and there, for the algae blooms to die off or clear up. But we do monitor it and clean it up. And I think last year, we had a bloom happened about this time of year. We sprayed it. It took about 3 weeks for it to totally clear up and burn off and stay clear. But it's just part of the natural ecosystem of the lake. That algae has a very narrow temperature band where it thrives. So anyway, that's the status on that. We do have the aerator, working on repair, but it would not, even if it were operating, it would not dramatically affect the algae bloom. Okay, next question. What's the status on Blackhawk? Pro Shop's back to work and we have more than enough security to check on the lake. When can I expect to be able to get a key? Great question. We aren't fully staffed back in security yet. We are bringing, a couple officers back, and so we will have more capacity to handle that. At this point, though, we're in the same position that we were before. So the answer I gave a couple weeks ago is the same answer. The Blackhawk Lake is not owned by us. We have an easement to have access to the lake and to use the lake. However, we are subject to very specific rules and restrictions to maintain and protect that easement. And so, as we bring, security staff back up, and then we can meet our obligations to patrol that, on a regular basis, and a safe way to distribute keys, we'll be looking at opening that back up again. I expect it would be a matter of a couple weeks. I hope everybody understands and knows that I from the beginning, I've been a proponent of keeping as many things open as we can. But we also have to weigh that against, like the pool with the legality issue. It's a different risk. Same thing with Black Hawk Lake. It's a different, it's a risk that we could lose access to the lake permanently if we don't comply with all of the, rules and obligations of our easement. It is a little different at the golf course. We do completely own the golf course, so there are no restrictions there. So it's a different set of circumstances. Same thing with the rec center. Playground's closed, according to state law, but there's nothing that prevents us from, keeping the rest of the rec center available and open for use. And so where we can do that, we do that. Where it does present an unusual risk to the association, then we've got to factor that in. So, and I do promise you, I understand it's frustrating, and I do want to keep things, as open as we can. Final answer, Black Hawk Lake, I expect within a couple weeks. I can't give you a specific date right now, but I expect within a couple weeks we'll have that, up and going again. Just one of the other components of that, just for information's sake, we are required by our easement agreement to charge a daily fee to use Black Hawk Lake. In the past, we had issued annual passes. That's technically not allowed by our easement agreement. So we are technically required to charge a daily fee and issue daily passes. And so while we're lower on staff with security, and we're lower on staff in admin, it doesn't seem like it adds a lot, but it does add other work and other there are other concerns with it too. So I'm sorry if the person asking this question doesn't like the answer. I don't really like it either, but that's where we are right now. Okay, let's see. I think I had one other question that I saw came in earlier this afternoon. And the question was about how long it takes to get a reply to calls and emails from the association. So in general, you should be getting replies. Our target would be to reply within 24 hours, which has been a little bit of a challenge lately. Like I've mentioned in some of the communications we've had, our admin staff is actually working 30% fewer hours during this COVID crisis than we were working before. So that definitely has had an impact on that. And then as it relates to me personally, I get lots and lots of emails and phone calls. I do respond to those, when I am able. I'll be straight up. It's not the most urgent matter that I'm dealing with. But I always have Fridays that I have set aside to have appointments, either a scheduled appointment to make a call, or a scheduled appointment to meet in person with any homeowner. And if you're not available to meet or to schedule a call at that time, I'm happy to do it after hours, or I'm even happy to do it on the weekends. But I do that on a scheduled basis, not just on an ad hoc basis. The reason for that is there's so many things going on and so many things that need attention. But if something rises to the level that it's that important that you want to have a personal meeting with me or the general manager, that's totally fine. Always available, always open on Fridays, or as I said, on an evening or even a weekend if you work and can't make a Friday. But in terms of, are you going to get an answer on an email or a phone call? It really depends on how much else is going on at that time, if you've directed that to me personally. So it's not that I don't care, I do. It's just that we really, really have our hands full at the moment with everything that's going on. And so I thought there was a question that I saw too. Let me see if I've got one more in this stack. Okay, so there's that one. Okay, I've got one more question that I received here, and that was, could we get an update on PPP? Who's actually being kept on payroll that can benefit from PPP? Does the HOA monitor the weed and fire control amount around the neighborhood? I'm seeing lots that are not complying. And then there's a compliment to Ken at the golf course. Which thank you for that compliment. I'll be sure to pass that on. And a note about encouraging and promoting more play. I'm going to take the last one first. We actually have seen significant growth in play at the golf course. And we covered that at the board meeting a little bit, but that covered the revenues for the month of May. But even after that, we've actually seen play continue to increase. We actually had some of our best days ever on the golf course in terms of daily play, where this past weekend, we did, over the weekend, we did more than $750 in those 2 days, which is a very, very high number for us in daily play. That doesn't take into account the annuals that we have. So we are seeing the golf course being utilized quite a bit more often. People playing it for the first time, more residents playing. So that's very positive to see. We hope that continues after the COVID, after the COVID-19 shelter-in-place orders continue to be relaxed. I'm going to go backwards order. Does the HOA monitor the weed and fire control around the neighborhood? As it relates to fire control, that actually is outside of our area of responsibility. That's monitored by the county. We do have some capability of monitoring it not from a safety standpoint in particular, but from an appearance standpoint. So if yards are unkempt, you can report that to the ECC. We don't specifically go drive around, looking for that. We respond to that based on what gets reported to us. But we're unable, to go on to private property, and this comes up at time. But we're unable to go on. I better word it this way. It's not that we're technically unable to go onto private property. It's that there's a conflict between the laws of what happens if we do. So there are some laws that say we have the rights to go on and do that, and we could clean up the owner's area and charge them for it. But then there are other laws that are in conflict with that, that would have us trespassing. And so, at this point, that's not something that we do or something that we've done. And fire control is up to the county. They have somebody that comes and monitors that, and can issue citations and fines for that. we are not able to the best of my knowledge, to be able to issue fines for fire or safety issues. So, all right, can we get an update on PPP? Who's actually being kept on the payroll that can benefit from PPP? We have almost 100% of our full-time staff working. Most of the staff that is not working at this point is part-time restaurant staff. By far the majority of our, of our employees are working. Now they are working at reduced hours, in many cases because they have children at home and that they need to, handle school for them. So now that season is wrapping up, we actually have several employees coming back to work more hours, which will be helpful and allow us to catch up on things. In terms of status of PPP, it continues to remain a moving target. The House passed approved legislation last week that extended the period of PPP forgiveness, the period of time in which you have to use PPP funds. They extended that in the House legislation from 8 weeks up to 24 weeks. They extended the period of time from when you need to hire employees back to qualify for PPP forgiveness to January 1st. And they decreased the ratio of money that you have to spend on wages versus utilities and other business expenses from 75% to 60%. That was just the House, okay? So that passed 427 to 1. The Senate has a similar bill. So there is strong support in the Senate for passing something similar. But the Senate bill at this point extends the PPP spending window from 8 weeks to 16 weeks, which is the primary difference. And it doesn't extend the rehire portion as long as the House bill does. I'm very optimistic, okay, cautiously optimistic, but with a high level of confidence that period of time for us to use PPP funds will get extended, which would be very beneficial for us. However, until that happens, we are operating under the assumption that we only have, the 8 weeks in which to use those funds, and that we have to use those funds in a very specific manner. So we are, working to maximize the amount of PPP forgiveness that the association qualifies for. Because it is so uncertain and because it is such a moving target, I'm not going to talk specifically about what those numbers are until we actually have it and it's finalized. But I will say that regardless of what happens, it is going to result in the association benefiting significantly from federal dollars being put into our community, which is a very nice silver lining in the storm cloud of COVID-19. Okay, and those were the questions that we had this week. I'm going to go ahead and and open it up if anybody else has a question that they'd like to ask in person or another comment. I'll do my best to respond or answer that.
Hi, John. It's Preston here. I was late to the call. I'm not sure if you answered my question or not. If you did, it's fine. I can look at the recording later.
I don't recall, Preston, what question did you send in and when did you send it in?
It was around like 4:30. I just had a question because the energy costs are lumped all together. I just wanted to see what our costs just for PG&E were. And I was wondering if you could, with redacting information, share those amounts, like how much we're buying and this and that. I'm just curious, and I'm really just trying to see if we can reduce that cost. And I want to give some insight with my knowledge, but I would need your help to kind of get those figures.
Yeah, sure. We do on the detail, on the detail budget, break down, electricity costs, specifically. But it is like you say, we have different rates and different, different services at each of our venues. Krista, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kick that one over to the engineering committee, because they're already in the process of doing some work on this. And they have not been meeting the last couple months. But there is work already being done on this. So I will forward that on to David Mahan, who's the chair of the engineering committee. I'm gonna let him handle the details on that one. Okay. So.
And that's fine. I was just looking to see if you could share the bills from like a financial perspective. I mean, they're doing their own thing, but I also want to conduct my own like research into it, and not with anything but a good intention.
Sure. No, and I understand where you're coming from on that. I do think there is, there definitely is potential for us to find ways to save money on electricity, and potentially a lot of money on electricity. For example, I have Ken Harrington looking at a program that PG&E has that provides 0% on-bill funding for energy saving projects of, up to, I think it's $4 million. It might actually even be higher than that. So we are looking into that type of thing too, because that could replace, at no cash outlay and at no, with no cash outlay and on bill 0% financing to replace some of our inefficient well pumps, for example. So, he's been looking into that as well. So
I think that's an exceptional idea. The only thing with the on-bill financing is that once you enter into one of those, it is a long-term payment agreement. So,
sure.
And that's why I would want to be wary with if we're doing renewables, right? If we look at renewables, and I run into cities doing this all the time in my work, you have a contract or something, the aspect of having on-bill financing, which is great, and I encourage it if we can use it. But then we try to say offset the usage with renewables. Well, we won't be allowed to do that. And so what would happen is we'd be locked into certain accounts having to repay that funds. And I'm open to whatever works and makes the most sense, but I just want to make that known. Like if we do on-bill financing, we get stuck making those payments. If we choose to terminate the service or provide our own energy, we have to pay termination payments. Just like any contract.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. I actually spent a couple of years working for a company that designed these programs for PG&E, because PG&E. So it's really funny because PG&E is in the business of selling electricity, right? Or we think they're in the business of selling electricity, but they're actually mandated by the PUC to help companies save electricity and use less electricity. It's a really odd business model. And you're absolutely right. With renewables and on-bill financing for things like solar, you can actually find yourself in a very big world of hurt as PG&E's rates change, which they're in the process of changing to all time of use rates. And we're actually also seeing a shift in when rates peak. It's actually more expensive time of use now, because demand is greater from like 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 8 o'clock in the evening than it is in the middle of the day, because there is so much solar that's already come on to use in the California network. What I was talking about with the water company in particular was different. It wasn't financing for renewable. It was financing for direct energy savings. Right. So if you have a pump and you can improve the efficiency of that pump by 30%, it is gonna reduce your bill 30%, because it's going to use less electricity, not replacing it with something else.
And John, my point was we reduce electricity by putting in, say, variable speed pumps or something that's efficient, which I totally encourage. It's just that it gets wary, like you're saying, where we can reduce usage by say 30%, and then we try to offset something with renewables, but we can't, because then it's a loss, and so we're stuck. right? And so that's what I'm just trying to prevent. I'm all for efficiency. I just want to make sure that, as you mentioned, rates are changing, solar rates are changing, solar credit rates are changing. 3 to 7% increase from the utilities in California this year. And so I just want to offer my assistance to the engineering, which is not meeting, in a way where we can solve this sooner than 8 months from now, a year from now, when we meet again. Because given the landscape, there's a lot of interesting things that are happening that we can take advantage of. For example, there's like a $0 payment in year one for commercial solar. And I only know this because I know some very big people in the finance industry that I work with, and they're innovating because of what's happening to the market. And so we could potentially get a system and save hundreds of thousands of dollars right away, and then next year just, save 30 or 40%. But we could essentially save everything in 1 year and spend nothing. And the only reason that I'm being a little advantageous about this is because it's like a time sensitive thing. We would need to investigate it and see if we apply for these programs and can fit within these constraints within like the next 8 months.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. Yeah, no, I totally understand where you're coming from on that. So like I said, there is some work that has been done on this, and we've got some people on the engineering committee that are also familiar with it. So I'm honestly, it's a big thing, and it is a priority. I'm dealing with some really short time frames on the PPP stuff and a couple other things with COVID-19. I can't handle that one, right now. But I will, like I said, I will, as soon as we're done, send this over to David and ask him to get in touch with you and the other people on the engineering committee that have been looking into this. And totally appreciate
that would be great.
Where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful recommendation and wonderful advice. And I totally hear where you're coming from, and it again could be a really, really beneficial thing for us. So, so thank you for that part.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to helping the engineering committee.
All right, thank you. All right, anybody else? Any other comments, questions?
Neil Torr here.
I have a question.
Well, I'll let her go. You go first.
Oh, are you sure?
Yeah, sure. Caller 2.
Oh, okay. I have a very, just a small question about the tennis courts. I saw that in the budget for this year that we spent about $5,500 on the tennis courts, and I know $400 of that was labor, and I know we put some plywood and some paint with that new backboard, but I don't see anywhere near $5,000 having been spent on the tennis courts.
Okay, it's some of that is how the allocation is done, but the other is electricity costs, and it actually helps me if I get these questions in advance, because I can break down the details for you better. To show you what makes up that portion, and so it's essentially it's a combination of labor and a prorated portion of the electricity, for that plus some other miscellaneous expenses. But I would be happy, it actually would help me if you submit it as a question to QA for next week, so that I don't forget.
Okay.
I probably won't, but I might. And then I'll break out the detail for you, so you know exactly what it covers.
So it's basically the tennis court sharing cost of electricity and various other things. Yeah, because you don't really see $5,000.
And a portion of insurance, and a portion of other various operating expenses. So doesn't mean we directly spent $5,000 on materials for the tennis courts. Right, because but anyway, if you want to send that in, I'll pull the details, and I'll be happy to present that next Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering how the bathrooms going. That's exciting that they're getting done.
Yeah, great question. So the bathrooms in the clubhouse. We're actually waiting on a couple pieces of material, but but the plumbing has all been refinished. The base floor has all been replaced. It actually was floated today. You know, the walls have been painted. You know, in the men's bathroom, we're installing a water-free urinal as a cost savings measure. So it's coming along, but it's not quite done yet. And in terms of the ADA bathroom, we're still that goes into the library. We're still working on a couple issues with that. So unfortunately, at this time, I don't have any definitive date on when that one's going to be done.
Okay. And my wife showed me a band posting that they're going to be playing on June 26th at the Blue Heron. I'm like, what?
I don't.
I didn't think we're open yet then, are we?
Yeah, Neil, you faded out on that one. What's the?
Oh, it's just a band called, I think, Hole Shot or something like that. It was like, yeah, we're going to be at the Blue Heron on the 26th. And it was like, maybe that's what they had planned originally.
Yeah, no, at this point we have no band scheduled. Unfortunately, it's actually a super fun thing to do during the summer, but we have nothing on the schedule at the clubhouse at this point. So sadly, but
yeah. Okay, that's my questions. Next.
Maybe we can get him to play a virtual concert. So
there you go.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Any comments or quick questions?
Yes, Jonathan. This is Beata. I have a question on the YSPUC board meetings. Are they going to stop having those monthly and just going to an annual meeting?
Beata, I'll refer that one over to David Mahan also. It's a little different with YSPUC than it is with YLOA, but it really is up to the YSPUC board to determine when they want to meet again. There haven't been any urgent issues that we're dealing with on YSPUC. We're continuing to operate and do what we need to do there. And so we haven't required any board decisions to authorize funding or any of those kinds of things. So we haven't, and we don't have a requirement to meet for YSPUC. But I will certainly pass that question on to him, and then, let him respond to that one.
Okay, and I have another question. Has the water increases been approved by PUC?
At this point, no. We're the process of submitting our financials to PUC to have a rate evaluation done is still in process. It hasn't been completed or submitted to the PUC yet.
Okay, and how much does that rate evaluation cost for them to do that?
How much does the process cost?
Yes, no, not the process, actually to do the study.
Yeah. So we outsource that to, because there's very specific expertise that needs to be done to analyze the financials and prepare it in the way that the PUC requests it and needs it for their review. So we authorized for the budget last year, a total of $25,000 for that. It will most likely come in less than that, but we won't know for sure until we complete the entire process.
Okay, and I have one more question on the water company. The building that we bought for $275,000 and the SCADA, am I saying that right? For $175,000, would that be included in the operating costs in that report?
Well, those aren't operating costs. Those are capital acquisitions. And so they're actually become assets of the water company. So it was like when we bought the building, we had money in the bank. Instead, we took the money from the bank and we put it into the building instead, which means our cash went down, but our balance sheet didn't change because the building itself has value. And we could sell that building at some point in the future to recover that cash. So it will show up on the report as an asset of the water company. Same thing with SCADA. The SCADA would show up as an asset of the water company, but it also will show up as there is a small operating cost. And then that also represents an investment in our plant infrastructure. And so that will, so there will be some depreciation that gets, allocated to that as well. And I'm speaking in general, not how exactly it shows up on what the forms that are submitted to the PUC is. I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. But the way they will show up is as assets, not as expenses.
Okay, thank you.
So if where you're going, Beata, is saying, oh, well, they spent this, they spent 275 on this, they spent 175 on this, that's going to make the expenses look like they spend a whole lot of money, right?
Right.
It doesn't get reported that way because those are assets. So
okay.
It's not an expense, it's an asset.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
John, it's Preston here. A follow-up question. What are we getting the SCADA on? Is it to replace our old control software technology? Is it on everything? Is it on a couple things?
Yeah, it's on all of our primary pumps and tanks. It is in the process of being installed right now. The final hookup is actually being done by an outside hookup and configuration is actually being done by an outside consultant. And who has special expertise, again, in configuring and setting up the SCADA system. Much of the physical plant of that is being done by our team. And I actually talked to Ken Harrington about this, it was today, actually was this morning. And he's finishing up, the consultant is finishing up another project. So we're about 2 weeks away, roughly, from him being available to come do the work on our system. And it's anticipated to take about 15 to 20 days of his time to complete the configuration here. So, we're still in kind of this weird phase with COVID-19. Things, shift and adjust, but I would anticipate by the middle of July or before the end of July, we should have that up and operational, unless there are other unforeseen things that occur that I'm not presently aware of.
Okay, that's a good response, and that's good. It's a good thing we're doing all the equipment as opposed to some of the equipment. So I mean, if you're going to spend the money, you have to replace everything. So awesome.
Yeah, it's on all of the pumps that we use regularly. There are 2 or 3 that we almost never use, so we're not doing those. But all the tanks, all the places where we monitor and control water, and all the pumps that we regularly use. So, okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us. Don't forget about the tennis court detail question. I probably will remember, but if you submit it to QA, that just helps me get the information in front of me so I can be precise about the answer. Everybody have a great week, and we'll talk again next Tuesday.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks.
All right.